Okay.
Welcome. We are back.
Welcome. We have a new book today.
We're doing
Shouldn't be
the
too bad.
Wendigo. We're trying something like a little more. Well, we're looking for like a kind of like cryptid story, and I couldn't find anything that was like interesting, and I stumbled upon this. So we're gonna see.
Seems good.
Yeah, it seems cool. It's old. Usually older stuff's usually pretty good.
Yeah, might have some weird words in it again though. We will
That's
search them
it's
up.
okay. It's fine. Yeah, we'll
Well,
search it up if we don't know what it is, and
yeah.
we'll try not to struggle with the pronunciation.
All right. The Wendigo. A considerable number of hunting parties were out that year without finding so much as a fresh trail. For the moose were uncommonly shy, and the various Nimrods returned to the bosoms of their respective families with the best excuses the facts of their imaginations could suggest. Dr. Cathcart, among others, came back without a trophy, but he brought instead the memory of an experience which he declares was worth all the bull moose that had ever been shot. But then, Cathcart of Aberdeen was interested in other things besides moose. Amongst them, the vagaries of the human. Now I gotta look that up.
Vagaries?
Vagaries.
Vagaries?
Vagary? I have no idea.
What's
Meaning.
vagaries?
Vagary, an unexpected and inexplicable change in a situation or in someone's behavior.
Okay,
Vagary.
that's.
Okay.
Hmm.
Among them, the vagaries of the human mind. This particular story, however, found no mention in his book on collective hallucination for the simple reason. So he confided once to a fellow colleague that he himself played to intimidate a part in it, to form a competent judgment of the affair as a whole. Damn, I'm struggling.
It's okay.
Besides himself and his guide, Hank Davis, there was young Simpson, his nephew, a divinity student destined for the Wee Kirk. Then, on his first visit to Canadian backwoods, and the latter's guide, Defago, Joseph Defago, was a French Canuck who had strayed from his native province of Quebec years before, and had got caught in Rat Portage when the Canadian Pacific Railway was a building. A man who, in addition to his unparalleled knowledge of woodcraft and bush lore, could also sing the old Voyager songs and tell a capital hunting yarn into the bargain. He was deeply susceptible, moreover, to that singular spell which the wilderness lays upon certain lonely natures, and he loved the wild solitudes with a kind of romantic passion that amounted almost to an obsession. The life of the backwoods fascinated him, whence, doubtless, his surpassing efficiency in dealing with their mysteries. On this particular expedition, he was Hank's choice. Hank knew him and swore by him. He also swore at him.
Just as a pal
I think
might. Or is that dialogue or is that just a quote?
I it might just be a quote.
I think it's just a quote.
Just as a pal might. And since he had a vocabulary of picture skew, I'm looking that up as well.
I'm hearing like a ticking in your background. What is that?
Oh, that's Jacob here. Let me close my door. That's my brother's fan
Okay.
here. Do you hear it now?
No.
Okay. Picturesque. Visually okay. Visually attractive,
Okay, I know
especially
what
in a
picturesque is. I think.
yeah. Yeah. And since he had a vocabulary of picturesque, if utterly meaningless, oaths, the conversation between the two stalwart and hardy woodsmen was often of a rather lively description. This river of expletives, however, Hank agreed to dam a little out of. Hold on, I closed my window here. Hank agreed to dam a little out of respect for his old hunting boss. Dr. Cathcart, whom, of course, he addressed after the fashion of the country as Doc, and only because he understood that young Simpson was already a bit of a parson. He had, however, one objection to Defago, and one only, which was that the French Canadians sometimes exhibited what Hank described as the output of a cursed and dismal mind, meaning apparently that he sometimes was true to type, Latin type, and suffered fits of a kind of silent morosense when nothing could induce him to utter speech. Defago, that is to say, was imaginative and melancholy, and as a rule it was too long a spell of civilization that induced the attacks. For a few days of the wilderness invariably cured them. I think that's some. Hold on.
Invulnerability
No,
or
I think it's like variables in every
oh,
case or on every occasion, always. So let me say this. Invariably, okay. The meals here are invariably big and healthy and hearty. Okay, so it's like always.
do you want me to take over the next
For
paragraph or do you want to keep going?
yeah, there's not much reading right
Okay.
now or like talking.
All right, let me do this one.
Sorry.
This, then, was the party of four that found themselves in the camp last week in October of that shy moose year, way up in the wilderness north of the Rat Portage, a forsaken and desolate country. There was also Punk, an Indian who had accompa- accompanied
Accompanied.
Dr. Ketchcart and Hank on their hunting trips in previous years, and who acted as cook. His duties was merely to stay in camp, catch fish, and prepare venison steaks and coffee at a few minutes' notice. He dressed in the worn-out cloth clothes, bequeathed. Yeah, bequeathed, right?
Yep.
That's bequeathed.
Yep.
Bequeathed to him by former patrons, and expect for his coarse black hair, dark skin, he looked in these city garments. No more like a real redskin than a stage Negro looks like real African for all that. However, Punk in him still
Oh,
the
bro, Punk had
instinct.
it in him.
Punk had in, is that his name?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that's why it's fucking me up. Punk
Oh,
had in
okay.
him still the instincts of his dying race. His taciturn
Taciturn?
taciturn.
Let me look that up. That's
I've
a
never
weird
heard that
word.
one either.
See here. Of a person reserved or uncommunicative in speech, saying little. After such gatherings, she would be taciturn and morose.
Hmm.
So it's like quiet and like he's not really talking. Yeah.
Taciturn's silence and his endurance survived also his superstition. What's with all these old books and saying Negro? He's an Indian, bro. What does that even have?
I I guess it's like he looked in these city garments no more like a real redskin than a stage Negro. So it's like it looks like a real African. So it's he just looks like they're saying he looks like a the people in Canada the natives of Canada.
No, yeah,
So they're
I
just saying
get
like
that. Yeah, I guess if you're doing like I
it's
guess
just
that's how they compare it, right?
yeah.
I mean, this book's
And
also
it's like
from 1910,
it's
so
old. So like that was a normalized word back then.
yeah, yeah. All right, I
Uh
got. You want me to take this one and
do
you
you
do
want,
the next, or
I think there's talking coming up here soon. So do you want
okay,
me
okay,
to
yeah,
do
you do
this
that
one?
one then.
The party round the blazing fire that night were despondent. For a week had passed without a single sign of recent moose discovering itself. Defago had sung his song and plunged into a story, but Hank, in bad humor, reminded him so often that he kept musing up the facts so that it was. Oh, I think this is speech here. Hold on.
Here,
He kept musing up the facts. Right here, yeah.
he kept musing up the facts so that it was most all nothing, but a but a petered out lie that the Frenchman had
That
finally subsided into a sulky silence which nothing seemed likely to break.
Dr.
And
Cathcart and his nephew were fairly done after an exhausting day. Punk was washing up the dishes, grunting to himself under the lean-to off branches, where he later also slept. No one troubled to stir the slowly dying fire. Overhead, the stars were brilliant, in a sky quite wintry, and there was so little wind that ice was already forming stealthily along the shores of the still lake behind them. The silence of the vast listening forest stole forward and enveloped them. Hank broke in suddenly with his nasal voice.
I'm in favor of breaking new ground tomorrow, Doc.
He observed with energy, looking across at his employer.
We don't stand a dead Dago's chance around here. Agreed.
Said Cathcart, always a man of few words.
Think the idea's good. Sure, Pop. It's good.
Hank resumed with confidence.
Suppose now you and I strike west. Up Garden Lake. Way for a change. None of us ain't touched that quiet bit o' land. Yet. God damn, that's some old ass speech. that,
Yeah.
that is crazy. I'm with you. And you, DeFago? Take Mr. Simpson along in the small canoe. Skip across the lake portage, over into 50 Island water, and take a good squint down that there southern shore. The moose yarded?
Uh,
Is
the
that
moose yarded there like
yarded?
hell last year. I think that might be a term for moose or some
Like,
shit. Like what they
I'm
do.
wondering if that's like a term for like staying or
Uh,
like being.
oh yeah, of deer or moose gathered as a herd for the winter. So
Okay,
that yeah, they grouped up there.
so they grouped up. It's like grouped up. The moose
They moved up.
yarded there like hell last year, and for all we know, they may be doing it again this year just to spite us.
Fago, keeping his eyes on the fire, said nothing by way of reply. He was still offended, possibly about his interrupted story.
No one's been up this that way this year, and I'll lay my bottom dollar on that. Hank added with emphasis. Oh, that's you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hank added with emphasis, as though he had a reason for knowing. He looked over at his partner sharply.
Better take the little silk tent and stay away a couple of nights.
He concluded, as though the matter were definitely settled, for Hank was recognized as general organizer of the hunt and in charge of the party. It was obvious to anyone that Defago did not jump at the plan, but his silence seemed to convey something more than ordinary disapproval, and across his sensitive dark face there passed a curious expression like a flash of firelight, not so quickly, however, that the three men had not time to catch it.
He funked for some reason, I thought.
Simpson said afterwards in the tent he shared with his uncle. Dr. Cathcart made no immediate reply, although the look had interested him enough at the time for him to make a mental note of it. The expression had caused him a passing uneasiness he could not quite account for at the moment. But Hank, of course, had been the first to notice it, and the odd thing was that instead of becoming explosive or angry over the other's reluctance, he at once began to humor him a bit.
But there ain't no special
Special. I think that's an old dialect of
special
special. Let me see. Special meaning.
special.
Special, a non-standard humorous or dialectual spelling of the word special. It's
Okay,
often used in online contexts. Okay.
okay, but
Ain't no
there
special.
ain't no special. Okay, special
Feeling.
reason why no one's been up there this year.
He said with a perceptible hush in his tone.
Not the reason you mean anyway. Last year it was the fires that kept folks out, and this year I guess, it's just happened so. That's all.
His manner was clearly meant to be encouraging. Joseph DeFago raised his eyes a moment, then dropped them again. A breath of wind stole out of the forest and stirred the embers into a passing blaze. Dr. Cathcart again noticed the expression in the guide's face, and again he did not like it. But this time the nature of the look betrayed itself. In those eyes, for an instant, he caught the gleam of a man scared in his very soul. It disquieted him more than he cared to admit. Disquieted? That let's see what that word means as well.
I think there's gonna be a lot of looking up words in these next couple of videos coming.
Yeah. Make someone worried or uneasy. Okay.
Okay, bad Indians up that way.
He asked, with a laugh to ease matters a little, while Simpson, too sleepy to notice the subtle byplay, moved off to bed with a prodigious yawn.
Or or anything wrong with the country?
He added, when his nephew was out of hearing. Hank met his eye with something less than his usual frankness.
He's just scared.
I think that's like another
Scared?
offshoot of
Or
like
scared?
scared. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's just
scared.
scared. Yeah,
Scared. Hmm.
scared. He replied good-humoredly.
Scared stiff about some old fairy tale. Oh wait a minute. Okay, is this like this almost sounds like the guy like the way he
I
pronounces words.
I think that's what it means. I
So
think that's what it is.
so is this the Indian guy speaking like right here when he says scared stiff about some
Hank
old
met his
fairy
eye
tale?
with something less frankness. He just scared of. He gave. I think it's Hank. He's
Okay.
just scared. He replied, scared stiff about some old fairy tale. I think that's what he sounds
Okay.
like.
Okay. That's all. Ain't it old pard?
And he gave Defago a friendly kick on the. Oh god. Moccasined foot that lay nearest the fire. What the hell is this one? Wearing a means wearing or covered with moccasins. Oh, it's like an old shoe.
Oh.
Okay, my
Oh,
grandpa has a pair of
are
these.
these moccasins?
I think so.
Is that
Yeah.
as you pronounce
Okay,
it? I think it's mock. Is that like the old way you
uh,
used to pronounce it?
I believe so. And he gave Defago a friendly kick on the moccasined foot that lay nearest the fire. Defago looked up quickly, as from an interrupted reverie. A reverie, however, that had not prevented his seeing all that went on about him.
Scared nothing.
He answered with a flush of defiance.
There's nothing in the bush that can scare Joseph DeFago, and don't you forget it.
And the natural energy with which he spoke made it impossible to know whether he told the whole truth or only a part of it. Hank turned towards the doctor. He was just going to add something when he stopped abruptly and looked around. A sound close behind them, in the darkness, made all three start. It was old Punk, who had moved up from his lean-to while they talked, and now stood there just beyond the circle of firelight, listening.
Another time, Doc.
Hank whispered with a wink.
When the gallery ain't stepped down into the stalls.
and springing and springing to his feet, he slapped the Indian on the back and cried noisily.
Come up the fire and warm your dirty redskin a bit.
Damn.
Damn.
He dragged him he dragged him towards the blaze and threw more wood on.
That was a mighty good feed. You give us an hour or two back?
Continued heartily, as though to set the man's thoughts on another scent.
And it ain't Christian to let you stand out there freezing your old soul to hell. Well, we're getting all good and toasty.
Hunk moved and warmed his feet, smiling darkly at the other's volubility, which he only half understood, but saying nothing. And presently Dr. Cathcart, seeing that further conversation was impossible, followed his nephew's example and moved off to the tent, leaving the three men smoking over the now blazing fire. It's not easy to undress in a small tent without waking one's camp companion, and Cathcart, hardened and warm-blooded as he was, in spite of his 50-odd years, did what Hank would have described as considerable of his twilight in the open. He noticed during the process that Punk had meanwhile gone back to his lean-to, and that Hank and Defago were at it hammer and tongs, or rather hammer and anvil, the little French Canadian being the anvil. It was all very like the. What does that mean?
I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll figure it out. It was all very like the conventional stage picture of Western melodrama. The fire lighting up their faces with patches of alternate red and black. Defago in slouch hat and moccasins. How do you say that?
Moccasins. Moccasins.
Moccasins in the part of the Badlands villain. Hank, open-faced and hatless, with that reckless fling on his shoulders. The honest and deceived hero. and Old Punk eavesdropping in the background, supplying the atmosphere of mystery. The doctor smiled as he noticed the details, but at the same time something deep within him, he hardly knew what, shrank a little, as though an almost imperceptible breath of warning had touched the surface of his soul, and was gone again before he could seize it. Probably it was traceable to that scared expression he had seen in the eyes of Defago. I think that's where it is. We're talking.
Is that talking? I think it literally just says probably.
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought it would log into that.
And
Yeah,
you probably could have just said that.
yeah. For this hint of fugitive emotion, otherwise escaped his usually so keen analysis, Defago, he was vaguely aware, might cause trouble somehow. He was not as steady a guide as Hank, for instance, further than he could not get. You read this one because there's not much
Yeah,
talking, okay?
I'll read this one. He watched the men a moment longer before diving into the stuffy tent where Simpson already slept soundly. Hank, he saw, was swearing like a mad African in a New York N-word saloon, but it was swearing of affection, and the ridiculous oaths flew freely. Now that the cause of their obstruction was asleep, presently he put his arm almost tenderly upon his comrade's shoulder, and they moved off together into the shadows where their tent stood faintly glimmering. Punk, to a moment later, followed their example and disappeared between his odorless
Odorous.
odorous
Odorous.
odorous odorous
Yeah.
blankets in the opposite direction. Dr. Cathcard then likewise turned in weariness
Turned in weariness. Yeah.
weariness okay weariness,
I
and
yeah.
slept still, fighting in his mind with obscure curiosity to know what it was that had scared DeFago about the country up 50 Island waterway, wondering too why Punk's presence had prevented the completion of what Hank had to say. Then sleep overtook him. He would know tomorrow. Hank would tell him the story while they trudged after elusive moose.
Deep silence fell about the little camp, planted there so audaciously in the jaws of the wilderness. The lake gleamed like a sheet of black glass beneath the stars. The cold air pricked in the draughts of night that poured their silent tide from the depths of the forest, with messages from distant ridges and from lakes just beginning to freeze. There lay already the faint, bleak odors of coming winter. White men, with their dull scent, might never have divined them. The fragrance of the wood fire would have concealed from them these almost electrical hints of moss and bark and hardening swamp 100 miles away. Even Hank and Defago, suddenly in league with the soul of the woods as they were, probably would have spread their delicate nostrils in vain.
But an hour later, when all slept like the dead, old Punk crept from his blankets and went down to the shore of the lake like a shadow, silently, and only the Indian blood can move. He raised his head and looked about him. The thick darkness rendered sight of small avail, but like the animals, he possessed other senses the darkness could not mute. That is cool. That was some cool ass
That is
description.
that's sick.
He listened, then sniffed the air, motionless as a hemlock stem. He stood there after 5 minutes again. He lifted his head and sniffed. And yet once again a tingling of the wonderful nerves that betrayed itself by no other sign ran through ran through him as he tasted the keen air. Then merging his figure into the surrounding blackness in a way that only wild men and animals understand, he turned, still moving like a shadow, and went stealthily back to his lean-to and his bed.
And soon after he slept, the change of wind he had divined stirred gently the reflection of the stars within the lake, rising among the far ridges of the country beyond 50 Island water. It came from the direction in which he had stared, and it passed over the sleeping camp with a faint and sighing murmur, through the tops of the big trees that was almost too delicate to be audible, With it, down the desert paths of the night, though too faint, too high even, for the Indians' hair-like nerves, there passed a curious thin odor, strangely disquieting, an odor of something that seemed unfamiliar, utterly unknown.
The French Canadian and the man of Indian blood each stirred uneasily in his sleep just about this time, though neither of them woke. Then the ghost of that unforgettably strange odor passed away, and was lost among the leagues of tent tentalus tenantless
Tenantilus.
tenantalus
Tenant. I'm looking what that means. Of
tenantalus
tenant.
tenantalus
For
forest beyond.
lacking a tenant, or okay, yeah,
Okay,
tenantless.
so it's like unoccupied.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, in the morning, the camp was astir before the sun. There had been a light fall of snow during the night, and the air was sharp. Punk had done his duty bedtimes, or beat his duty betimes, for the odors of coffee and fried bacon reached every tent. All were in good spirits.
Winds shifted, cried Hank, vigorously watching Simpson and his guide already loading the small canoe. It's across the lake, dead right for you fellas. Is that dialogue? Yeah. It's across the
Yep.
lake, dead right for you fellers. And the snow'll make bully trails, and if there's any oh my god, my fucking hang on.
Are you tweaking?
my voice is tweaking. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna reread that. It's across the
Okay.
lake, dead right for you fellers, and the snow'll make bully trails. If there's any moose musing around up there, they'll not get as much as a tail end scent of you with the wind as it is. Good luck, Moniscure de Fago.
Monsieur.
Monsieur, or Mon-
Monsieur. It's right.
Monsieur, okay.
It's like,
God damn it, is that French?
yeah,
Okay.
it's like Mister.
Monsieur de Fago, he added,
A
facetiously?
just
Facetiously?
that
Fatitious. Oh my god, I can't say that. Fatitiously.
face. What was the meaning of face? In a way that is not serious, an attempt to be funny or to appear clever about a serious subject. She
I don't know how
facetiosly
to say that.
challenged. That's a weird word.
Yeah. Giving the name
Unserious.
its French pronunciation for once, Bonnie Chance.
Bon chance.
Bon
Huh.
Chance.
DeFago returned to the good wishes, apparently in the best of spirits, the silent mood gone. Before 8 o'clock, old Punk had the camp to himself. Cathcart and Hank were far along the trail that led westwards, while the canoe that carried DeFago and Simpson, with silk tent and grub for 2 days, was already a dark speck, bobbing on the bosom of the lake, going due east.
The wintry sharpness of the air was tempered now by a sun that topped the wooded ridges and blazed with a luxurious warmth upon the world of lake and forest below. Loons flew skimming through the sparkling spray that the wind lifted. Divers shook their dripping heads to the sun and bobbed smartly out of sight again. And as far as eye could reach rose the leagues of endless crowding crowding bush desolate. Oh, desolate in the lonely sweep and grandeur, untrodden by foot of man and stretching in mighty unbroken carpet right up to the frozen shores of Hudson's Bay. God damn, bro.
That was you're struggling with that.
That was this fucker's elegant, bro. God damn.
He is.
I haven't read something like that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Fucking, this is pretty good so far.
This
Though.
is pretty good,
Enjoying it.
yeah.
Simpson, who saw it all for the first time as he paddled hard in the bows of the dancing canoe, was enchanted by its austere beauty. His heart drank in the sense of freedom and great spaces just as his lungs drank in the cool and perfumed wind. Behind him, in the stern seat, singing fragments of his native chanties, Defago steered the craft of birch bark like a thing of life, answering cheerfully all his companions' questions, Both were gay and lighthearted. Gay in this sentence means happy. On such occasions, men lose the superficial, worldly distinctions. They become human beings working together for a common end. Simpson, the employer, and Afago, the employed, among these primitive forces were simply two men, the guider and the guided. Superior knowledge, of course, assumed control, and the younger man fell without a second thought into the quasi-subordinate position. He never dreamed of objecting when Defago dropped the Mr. and addressed him as, say, Simpson, or Simpson Boss, which was invariably the case before they reached the farther shore after a stiff paddle of 12 miles against a head wind. He only laughed and liked it, then ceased to notice it all.
For this divinity student was a young man of parts and character, though as yet, of course, untraveled and on this trip. The first time he had seen any country but his own and little Switzerland, the huge scale of things somewhat bewildered him. It was one thing he realized to hear about primeval. Is that
Yep,
primeval?
primeval forests.
Yeah, primeval forests, and quiet another to see them. Well to dwell in
Wait.
them and seek. Shut up, bro.
Yeah.
Well to dwell in them and acquaintance with their wildlife was again an in this. Oh my god.
You
What
want
is?
me to read that?
Yeah, you read that. You read that.
While to dwell in them and seek acquaintance with their wildlife was, again, an initiation that no intelligent man could undergo without a certain shifting of personal values hitherto held for permanent and sacred.
Yeah,
God damn,
that is me, an
that's fucking
unintelligent man reading that. Holy shit.
bro. That shit hurt my fucking brain.
This guy makes me feel stupid, bro. I can't-
Dude, fucking God, this guy's got like IQ of like 500 to write
This
this
is
shit.
crazy. He definitely knows his shit or knew his shit. He's probably not
Yeah,
alive anymore, but
yeah. Was this like 1910?
1910 this was written. And I'm
I think he
assuming
died
he
in
was probably older when he wrote this.
yeah. Simpson knew that the first faint indication of this emotion when he held the new uh
303?
the 303 rifle. I was like, how do you say that? Because
Yeah,
there's a point
303.
there. 303 rifle in his hands and looked along its pair of faultless, gleaming barrels. 3 days' journey to their headquarters, by lake and portage, had carried the process a stage farther, and now that he was about to plunge beyond even the fringe of wilderness, where they were camped into the virgin heart of uninhabited regions, as vast as Europe itself. The true nature of the situation stole upon him with an effect of delight and awe that his imagination was fully capable of appreciating. It was himself and Afago against a multitude, at least against a Titan.
The bleak splendors of these remote and lonely forests rather overwhelmed him, with the sense of his own littleness. That stern quality of the tangled blackwoods which can only be described as merciless and terrible rose out of these far blue woods swimming upon the horizon and revealed itself. He understood the silent warning. He realized his own utter helplessness only to Fago as a symbol of a distant civilization, where man was master stood between him and a
Pitiless.
pitiless
Pitiless.
death
Yep.
by exhaustion and starvation. You want me to read this too?
It was yeah, if you want.
All right, I got it. I got it. Let me.
Lock in here.
It was thrilling to him, therefore, to watch Tefago turn over a canoe upon the shore, pack the paddles carefully underneath, and then proceed to blaze the spruce stems for some distance on either side of an almost invisible trail, with the careless remark, "Throw in, say Simpson, if anything happens to me. You'll find the canoe all correct?
Correct.
There's no T though.
Correct by these like
Correct?
he's
Like
it's
correct?
how he's speaking. You'll
Okay.
find the canoe all correct by these marks.
Or correct by
Like
these marks. Okay. You'll find the canoe all correct by these marks. Then strike due west into the sun to hit the home camp again. See?
It was the most natural thing in the world to say, and he said it without any noticeable inflection of the voice. Only it happened to express the youth's emotions at the moment with an utterance that was symbolic of the situation, and of his own helplessness as a factor in it. He was alone with the Fago, in a primitive world. That was all. The canoe, another symbol of man's ascendancy, was now to be left behind. Those small yellow patches, made on the trees by the axe, were the only indications of its hiding place.
Meanwhile, shouldering the packs between them, each man carrying his own rifle, they followed the slender trail over rocks and fallen trunks and across half frozen swamps, skirting numerous lakes that fairly gleamed the forest, their borders fringed with mist, and towards 5 o'clock found themselves suddenly on the edge of the woods, looking out across a large sheet of water in front of them, dotted with pine clad islands of all describable shapes and sizes. That says describable, right?
Yep.
Okay.
50 island water, announced Defago wearily. And the sun just going to dip his bald old head into it, he added, with unconscious poetry, and immediately they set about pitching camp for the night.
In very few minutes, under those skillful hands that
Skillful.
never made a movement too much or a movement too little, the silk tent stood taut and cozy. The beds of boughs, balsam
Balsam.
balsam
I don't know
boughs.
what that means.
I don't know. We'll just go with it. Balsam boughs ready laid and brisk cooking fire burned with a minimum of smoke. While the young Scotchman cleaned the fish they had. Hang on. When the young
Yeah, the fishy, bro. You get the fishy.
when the young Scotchman cleaned the fish they had taught trolling behind the canoe, the Fago guessed he would just as soon take turn through the bush for indications of moose. May come across trunk. Oh my god, dude. This is like. It's so tongue tying. May
Yeah.
come across trunk where they bind and rubbed horns, he said, as he moved off or feeding. Oh my god, bro. Okay, you know what? You say this last part.
He said, as he moved off, or feeding on the last of the maple leaves, and he was gone. I'll read, his small figure melted away like a shadow in the dusk, while Simpson noted with a kind of admiration how easily the forest absorbed him into herself. A few steps, it seemed, and he was no longer visible.
Yet there was little underbrush hereabouts. The trees stood somewhat apart, well spaced, and in the clearing grew silver birch and maple spear-like. Can you scroll up a little bit?
Got you.
Thank you. And slender against the immense stems of spruce and hemlock. But for occasional prostrate?
Prostrate, yep.
Prostrate monsters and the boulders of gray rock and thrust uncouth shoulders. Here and there out on the ground. Oh my god, dude. Here and there out of the ground. It might well have been of a park in the old country. Almost one might have seen in the hand of a man. A little to the right, however, began the great burnt section miles in the extent, proclaiming its real character, Brule, as it is called, where the fires of the previous year had raged for weeks, and the blackened stumps now rose gaunt and ugly, bereft of branches like gigantic match heads stuck into the ground, savage and desolate beyond words. The perfume of charcoal and rain-soaked ashes still hung faintly about it.
The dusk rapidly deepened. The glades grew dark. The crackling of the fire and the wash of little waves along the rocky lake shore were the only sounds audible. The wind had dropped with the sun, and in all that vast world of branches nothing stirred. Any moment, it seemed, the woodland gods, who were to be worshipped in silence and loneliness, might stretch their mighty and terrific outlines among the trees. In front, through doorways pillared by huge straight stems, lay the stretch of 50 island water, a crescent-shaped lake some 15 miles from tip to tip, and perhaps 5 miles across, where they were camped. A sky of rose and saffron, more clear than any atmosphere Simpson had ever known, still dropped its pale steaming fires across the waves, where the islands, 100, surely rather than 50, floated like the fairy bar barks
Barcues?
barcu barcus. I'm looking at it. A sailing ship, typically with three masts, in which the foremast and mainmast are square rigged and the mizzenmast is rigged fore and aft. Bark. Oh, a bark. Floated like the fairy barks of some enchanted fleet, fringed with pines, whose crests fingered most delicately the sky. They almost seemed to move upwards as the light faded, about to weigh anchor and navigate the pathways of the heavens instead of the currents of their native and desolate lake. I'll just read this. And strips of colored cloud, like flaunting pennons, signaled their departure into the stars.
The beauty of the scene was strangely uplifting. Simpson smoked the fish and burnt his fingers into the bargain in his efforts to enjoy it, and at the same time tend the frying pan and the fire. Yet, ever at the back of his thoughts lay the other's aspect of the wilderness. The indifference to human life, the merciless spirit of desolation which took no note of man, the sense of his utter loneliness, now that even Defago had gone, came close as he looked about him and listened for the sound of his companion's returning footsteps. There was a pleasure
There,
in the sensation, yet with it a perfectly comprehensible alarm, and instinctively the thought stirred in him. What could I, do? If anything happened and he did not come back?
they enjoyed their well-earned supper, eating untold quantities of fish and drinking unmilked tea strong enough to kill men who had not covered 30 miles of hard going, eating little on the way, and when it was over, they smoked and told stories round the blazing fire, laughing, stretching weary limbs, and discussing plans for the morrow. Defago was in excellent spirits, though disappointed at having no signs of moose to report, but it was dark, and he had not gone far. The Brule, too, was bad. His clothes and hands were smeared with charcoal. Simpson, watching him, realized with renewed vividness their position, alone together in the wilderness.
Defago,
He said presently,
these woods, are a bit too big to feel quite at home in. To feel comfortable in, I mean. Eh. He merely gave expression to mood of the moment. He was hardly prepared for the ear
earnestness,
earnestness, the
yep,
solemnity,
solemn,
solemnity,
solemnity,
solemnity, even with which the
sol.
guide took him up. You've hit it right, Simpson, boss.
He replied, fixing his searching brown eyes on his face.
And that's the truth, sure. There's no end to 'em. No end at all.
Then he added in a lowered tone, as if to himself,
There's lots found out that, and gone, plump to pieces.
but the man's gravity of manner was not quite to the other's liking. It was a little too suggestive for the scenery and setting. He was sorry he had broached the subject. He remembered suddenly how his uncle had told him that men were sometimes stricken with a strange fever of the wilderness, when the seduction, goddamn, of the uninhabited wastes caught them so fiercely that they went forth, half fascinated, half deluded, to their death. And he had a shrewd idea that his companion held something in sympathy with that queer type. He led the conversation on to other topics, on to Hank and the doctor, for instance, and the natural rivalry as to who should get the first sight of moose.
Is that all dialogue?
Uh, no. It's just mixed. It's mixed
Okay.
up here, so we'll both do it.
If they went due west, observed Defago carelessly. There's 60 miles between us now, with old Punk at halfway house eating himself full of bustin', with fish and coffee.
They laughed together over the picture, but the casual mention of those 60 miles again made Simpson realize the prodigious scale of this land where they hunted. 60 miles was a mere step. 200 little more than a step. Stories of lost hunters rose persistently before his memory. The passion and mystery of homeless and wandering men, seduced by the beauty of great forests, swept his soul in a way too vivid to be quite pleasant. He wondered vaguely whether it was the mood of his companion that invited the unwelcome suggestions with such persistence.
Sing us a song, DeFago, if you're not too tired.
He asked.
One of those old Voyager songs you sang the other night.
He handed his tobacco pouch to the guide and then his own pipe, while the Canadian, nothing loth, sent his light voice across the lake in one of those plaintive, almost melancholy chanties with which lumbermen and trappers lessen the burden of their labor. There was an appealing and romantic flavor about it,
Oh,
something that recalled the atmosphere of the old pioneer days, when Indians and wilderness were leagued together, battles frequent, and the old country farther off than it is today. The sound traveled pleasantly over the water, but the forest at their backs seemed to swallow it down with a single gulp that permitted neither echo nor resonance.
it was in the middle of the third verse that Simpsons noticed something unusual. Something that brought his thoughts back with a rush from faraway scenes. A curious change had come into the man's voice. Even before he knew what it was, uneasiness caught him, and looking up quickly, he saw DeFago. Though still singing, was peering about into the bush, as though he heard or saw something. His voice grew fainter, dropped to a hush. Then he ceased altogether. The same instant, with a movement amazingly alert, he started to his feet and stood upright, sniffing the air like a dog scenting game. He drew the air into his nostrils in a short, sharp breaths, turning quickly as he did so in all directions, and finally pointing down the lake shore, eastwards. It was a performance up oh my god. It was a performance
Unpleasant.
unpleasantly suggestive and at the same time singularly dramatic. Simpson's heart fluttered disagreeably as he watched it. Jesus Christ, dude, my this is
That's brutal.
this is great. That wasn't brutal. I don't think that was that bad. But like this guy is like this is some crazy
Really?
writing. I haven't read writing like this in a long time.
Yeah. It's just hard. Some of the words are very hard to pronounce.
Ah, it's all good. It's all good. Do you
Uh,
want me, oh, I'll read this. Lord, man, how you made me jump.
he exclaimed, on his feet beside him at the same instant, and peering over his shoulder into the sea of darkness.
What's up? Are you frightened?
Even before the question was out of his mouth, he knew it was foolish, for any man with a pair of eyes in his head could see that the Canadian had turned white down to his very gills. Not even sunburn and the glance of the fire could hide that. The student felt himself trembling a little, weakish in the knees.
What's up?
He repeated quickly.
Do you smell the moose or anything queer? Anything wrong?
He lowered his voice instinctively. The forest pressed round them with its encircling wall. The nearer trees' stems gleamed like bronze in the firelight. Beyond that, blackness, so far as he could tell, a silence of death. Just behind them, a passing puff of wind lifted a single leaf, looked at it, then laid it softly down again, without disturbing the rest of the covey. It seemed as if a million invisible causes had combined just to produce that single visible effect. Other life pulsed about them and was gone. Fago turned abruptly. The livid hue of his face had turned into a dirty gray.
I never said I heard or smelled nothing.
He said slowly and emphatically, in an oddly altered voice that conveyed somehow a touch of defiance.
I was only talking a look. Oh,
Taken.
I was only taking a look around so to speak. It's always a mistake to be too previous with your questions.
Then he added suddenly, with obvious effort, in his more natural voice,
Have you gone to the matches, Boss Simpson?
and proceeded to light the pipe he had half filled just before he began to sing. Without speaking another word, they sat down again by the fire. Defago, changing his side so that he could face the direction the wind came from, for even a tenderfoot could tell that. Defago changed his position in order to hear and smell all there was to be heard and smelt. And, since he now faced the lake with his back to the trees, it was evidently nothing in the forest that had sent so strange and sudden a warning to his marvelously trained nerves.
Guess now I don't feel like singing any.
He explained presently, of his own accord.
That song kindred brings back memories that troublesome to me. I never offer, hmm?
I never
Oh,
ought of. I never ought to have begun it.
observed?
I never ought of ought to have. I never ought to have.
I never observed begun it. It sets me
I think
on imagining things. See, I don't know, I've never heard that.
ought to. Never ought of. Like
Octave?
ought to. Like it ought to. I never ought to have. Like
Oh, ought. Really?
to. Yeah. I never
I've
ought to.
seen
I think it's like
ought
a
before, but not like.
ought ought to. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just the same.
Okay.
Uh. Clearly, the man was still fighting with something profoundly moving emotion. He wished to excuse himself in the eyes of the other, but the explanation, in that it was only a part of the truth, was a lie, and he knew perfectly well that Simpson was not deceived by it, for nothing could explain away the livid terror that had dropped over his face while he stood there sniffing the air, and nothing, no amount of blazing fire or chatting on ordinary subjects, could make that camp exactly as it had been before. The shadow of an unknown horror, naked and if unguessed, that had flashed for an instant in the face and gestures of the guide, had also communicated itself vaguely and therefore more potently to his companion. The guide's visible efforts to dissemble the truth only made things worse. Moreover, to add to the younger man's uneasiness was the difficulty, nay, the impossibility, he felt, of asking questions, and his complete ignorance as to the cause. Indians, wild animals, forest fires, all these, he knew, were wholly out of the question. His imagination searched vigorously, but in vain. I think that's a good place to end it for the video, right?
Yeah,
It's like about a third.
I think it's a good place to call out. We read what, 2 chapters?